So first and foremost, I would like to thank every one of you, the organizers, for giving me this opportunity to present on a topic on such a wonderful series of sessions, which I've been witnessing for all these 5 days. And it was really a lot of learning even I had, and I was really very, very happy about it. And thank you that I'm also part of it. So Archana has given a fantastic introduction, and I think directly we can go into the session. So when we talk about this critical thinking and problem solving, during our days when we studied, nothing of this sort was there. And we just studied what was said in the class, wrote the exam, got the marks, and got into the colleges. That's it. We don't know anything about the extra skills. Only thing what they used to say is you need to improve your communication skill. So that was the only thing that was imposed on all the students. But now this 21st century is not like that. And a lot of expectations are there from industry, because we are entering into the 21st century of automation, a conceptual age where one need to learn in a different way than what we had earlier. But the syllabus and the education pattern is the same what we had, but the expectations are slightly different. So we need to, as teachers, we need to enhance our teaching learning methodologies and also bring in a lot of skill enhancement into our curriculum. So today we are going to talk about a very, very important skill, that is critical thinking, which is required for every human being, not only for students. It's especially required for teachers, because we need to kindle the mindset of the children and make them to think in a critical way. So that is very important, that this particular topic is given to this particular faculty development program. So let me start making you to think about it, like learning stops at an answer and thinking happens during question. And why is always a great question. So this is one thing which every one of us will be wondering, like whenever there is an interview or whenever somebody is asking us some questions, we are naturally go into a thinking mode. So that why question happens and how all those questions make us to think. And the term 21st century skill is becoming more and more a part of the classroom. But what exactly the 21st century skill mean? What is the role of these skills in your classroom? So that is what we are going to see. And with the onset of this 21st century, the entire world has witnessed an era of intense transformation in all the areas, whether it is education or the global trade and economy or technology or society, whatever it is. And recently in COVID-19 pandemic is also throwing up challenges for an individual to cope with its limitations and all those impacts. And naturally for such times, a different skill set is required that would enable an individual to cope up and succeed in facing all these challenges in real life and leading in is holistic progress, because we need to progress in life. Every day there should be 1% improvement in everybody's life. So for which we need to overcome challenges. A lot of unpredicted, uncertain activities and events happen. So we need to prepare our mindset and overcome the challenges, because we cannot change something which is not changeable, or we cannot change something which happens without our control. So we need to change our mindset and try to adapt ourselves to all these uncertainties. And these skills are addressed as 21st century skills or the learning skills. And this is very, very important. And they are nothing but some of them are critical thinking and problem solving, collaboration across networks and leading by influence, agility and adaptability, initiative and entrepreneurship, effective oral and written communication, accessing and analyzing information, and curiosity and imagination. So this is the last one is really, really, really interesting. And I love this, because this is what is the need of the hour. The children should have developed a lot of curiosity and imagination, and for which we teachers have to put in a lot of effort in our teaching learning process. And these are the skills the students need to prepare themselves to improve their studies in their future careers, and also and future when they are adults. And there are four C's in 21st century skills, that is critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. So students need these skills to succeed and achieve great futures. The four aspects of 21st century skills are listed here, and these 21st century skills are most important for students now than ever before. That's why I said, like, we people were not given all these terms, are very, very new to us, and it is a little fancy also, and I see some resumes when people, the students fill in that they have creativity, they have critical thinking skills, and when we conduct interview and ask them, like, what do they mean, like, they will not be able to give an answer. They just wanted to fill in just for the sake of filling. But it is very, very essential in every education institution, right from school, to make the students understand that these skills are to be practiced. It cannot be taught. They need to experience and learn along with their technical knowledge, because now the technical knowledge part can also be taught, but these skills cannot be developed overnight. And these skills, they not only provide a framework for successful learning in the classroom, but ensure students can thrive in a world where change is constant and learning never stop. Not only for the students, but also for the teachers, learning never stop. And do you agree? Give place here to some further consideration of thought. You will never become great until your own thoughts make you great. So how many of us are consciously thinking about how we think? So that is what doesn't happen. It comes automatically. Whatever comes naturally, we just try to implement and go along with that. So you will never become great until your own thoughts make you great. And therefore, it is of the first importance that you should think. And these are something which will make us think. Any question will make us think. So what is thinking? Why is the sky blue? We have asked when we were kids to our mom and dad, like, why sky is blue? Have anyone answered those questions? Many of the parents will give different answers, but still, that make us to think. And is time travel possible? Why does not she like me? And why does not he like me? These two questions we keep on asking, when they don't talk to us properly, or when they don't respond to our messages or something like that. And we post something on the social media and somebody don't respond to that. We assume that they don't like us and they are not appreciating what we are. So all these things comes into our thought when such things happen. And what is thinking then? As you start asking questions and seek answers, you're in fact starting thinking. And in other words, thinking is purposeful, organized process that we use to make sense of the world. And what are the different types of thinking we have? We have a critical thinking and creative thinking, and both are problem solving at the end, but we are using the different parts of brain to do this thinking. When we talk about this critical thinking, we used to use our left brain because it is logical, sequential, rational, analytical, objective, and looks at paths. That means we need to make analysis, we need to evaluate, and we need to reason things. And through that, we come into a problem solving and decision making activity. But creative thinking is using your ideas. So for anybody to solve any problem or make any decisions, we have to have both these sorts of thinking, like critical thinking as well as creative thinking. So we need to use when it is required. So let me pose this set of questions to audience. Okay, so this is a quiz. Answer each question in order. So keep in your mind, and I will discuss on every question like how we would have thought. So these are all a sequential question. So you have to think the answers in order. How do you put a giraffe into a refrigerator? And how do you put an elephant into a refrigerator? And the Lion King is hosting an animal conference. All the animals attend except one. Which animal does not attend? And there is a river you must cross, but it is used by crocodiles, and you do not have a boat. So how do you manage it? So if I say these questions to the students, like how they will think and how they will answer. So first one, let us see, how do you put a giraffe into your refrigerator? What will be the answer of the child? The child may be thinking how the size of the refrigerator and the giraffe will match. How can I put a giraffe into the refrigerator? So all the complex ideas, comes into the mind. And the simple answer is open the refrigerator and put the giraffe and close the door. So this question tests whether you tend to do simple things in an overly complicated way. And second comes, how do you put an elephant into the refrigerator? Now the children will be very smart. They will tell, open the refrigerator, put the elephant inside. But is that answer right? Did they say that open the refrigerator and put the elephant into and close the door? It is a wrong answer. Why? Because open the refrigerator, take the giraffe, and then put the elephant and close the door. So this tests your ability to think through the repercussions of your previous actions. So then these children will be thinking, oh, I have already put a giraffe, so I have to take that out and then put this elephant. So this makes the children to think. Now the next question, the Lion King is hosting an animal conference. All the animals attend except one. Which animal does not attend? Again, the children will be thinking, and the answer is elephant. Because the elephant is in the refrigerator, you just put him there, and this tests the memory. And then comes to the last question. There is a river you must cross, but it is used by the crocodiles, and you do not have a boat. How do you manage it? What will be the correct answer? The correct answer is you jump into the river and swim across. So are you scared of the crocodiles which are there in the river? Don't you remember that already the crocodiles are attending the animal conference? So this is something which will make you think, like, we need to initiate the thinking process. And this also makes us to understand how we have to think in a step-by-step process. And now when I talk about critical thinking, I can also tell about some examples which are not how you think critically. You don't think critically. Some places, the first thing, the understanding that from the two pictures, the first figure, what does it say? This person is sitting on the branch of a tree. Though the person has climbed the tree and cut the branches, he did not think about how to come down. Maybe this is some cartoon picture, but we often do that in our daily life. We do a lot of things like this in our daily life. What happens to this second picture? The person is attempting to cut the rope, not understanding that the load above, when released, will fall directly on him. So most of the times we don't think about the consequences. We never plan for the consequences, and that will lead to a lot of problems and lot of damages. So he has not thought about maintaining safe distance and planned for an object to be brought down. So these are some of the type of thinkings which is not made by thinking. And what is critical thinking? Gather and access information in a balanced, reach conclusions justified, and recent argument based on available evidence. So now what is critical thinking? Critical thinking is a general term given to a wide range of cognitive and intellectual skills needed. Effectively identify, analyze, and evaluate arguments, discover and overcome personal prejudices and biases. This is a most important point which I want you people to think, because we already have a lot of things stored in our mind, and we have biases. And formulate present convincing reasons in support of conclusions, and make reasonable, intelligent decision about what to believe and what to do. And critical thinking is a skill. My dear ladies and gentlemen, you need to understand this, that it is only a skill. It need not be inborn for anybody. So fortunately for us, we can enhance it through practice. So now let me give you another example. What is critical thinking? This particular lady is reading a book. This book says only 55% of households have internet access in our country. So many times, when I attend some presentations of the students and all, they go through some books from the library and they collect the data and they just present. And they don't they don't check whether they are true or not. So this is one of the examples. So I would better check with the Government of India statistical website. So this girl or this lady is wondering, like, how come only 50% of the households have internet access in our country, that too in 21st century? So she goes and checks the Government of India statistical website. Being a government organization, they must have reliable data. And they say that more than 70% of the households in our country has internet access. That seems more likely. I wonder why the book is wrong. Now she starts thinking, oh my God, if I had believed the book statistics, then I would have been wrong. Thank God I checked the government website. So that sort of thinking, you need to verify all the data. So wait a minute, let me check when the book has been written. That's very long time ago. Oh, no wonder the statistics are out of date. So this is how one has to think and evaluate and then come to a conclusion. So that is what is very simple way of explaining critical thinking. So critical thinking refers to students' abilities to analyze, interpret, evaluate, make decisions, and solve problems. So analyzing whether the data is real or fake, and check with reliable agency for authentic information, and then understand and compare the information collected online with the data in the book and decide whether the book was giving correct answer or information or not. And after checking the correctness of information, accept or reject the claims in the book. Many times we used to see a lot of posts in the social media. We see a lot of pictures, faking pictures, and lakhs and crores of people will be watching that, and 90% of them will believe that. But only 10% of them will go and check. Maybe our own relatives, our own friends might have got some post about them in a fake way. Someone will be playing with them, and we create some impression about them, a wrong idea about them. So all these things happen even in this COVID time. A lot of things, posts come regarding the COVID pandemic, the symptoms, the medications, the vaccinations, all those things, about the oxygen availability, the medicine availability, whether you can take it or not. A lot of things come in the social media, and half of them or 75% of them take that and follow those methods. So you have to verify before you implement and before you take it into your heart. So what is exactly critical thinking? So in order to excel in this ever-changing world, one need to be capable of thinking critically to be creative, innovative, and adaptable. So critical thinking is the ability to think clearly and rationally, allows one to properly understand and address issues effectively. This form of purposeful thinking is at the core of our workshop today. And by thinking critically, one would be able to evaluate knowledge, clarify concepts, seek possibilities and alternatives, and then solve problems using logic, resourcefulness, and imagination. And a critical thinker would be able to think broadly and set down the right path in facing the daily challenges. And the critical thinking skills, the success is about changing the way you think about the way you think. So that is what is all about. And generally, critical thinking involves both problem solving and reasoning. And in fact, terms are often used interchangeably, but specifically, what are critical thinking skills? They make observation. They include the ability to make observation, be curious, asking relevant questions and finding the resources you need, and challenge and examine beliefs, assumptions, and opinions against facts, recognize and define problems, assess the validity of statements and arguments, make wise decisions and find valid solutions, and understand the logic and the logical argument. This is very, very important, and we need to have these abilities. And today, let me talk about the children. They have these admissions in major colleges by the competitive exams. Every examination has sections, and that is in reality, they test their ability to critically think. A student's performance in these examinations depends on his or her ability to observe, reason, and arrive at a solution in a given time of frame. And most of these entrance exams have multiple choice questions, and a student has to record the answer using a separate sheet of paper to record the answers numbering from 1 through 30 or 100. And in many cases, there will be no simple right or wrong choice, because critical thinking skills involves making the most reasonable selection or the one that best answers the question. So for enhancing one's performance, one has to look at all the questions critically for choosing the appropriate solutions. Regular practice only will result in improving one's critical skills, because that is not our habit. Everything we think, whatever comes spontaneously, we implement and we proceed further. So we need to practice even small things. When we start thinking, we need to make it as a practice, whether we are following the procedure and we are thinking. So we are going to have a quick overview of critical thinking and the issues surrounding it, defining it, and the common mistakes in assessing it, and its relation to communication skills, self-esteem, collaborative learning, motivation, curiosity, job skills for the future, the national standards, and the assessment strategies. So critical thinking is thinking about your thinking while you're thinking in order to make your thinking better. And there are two things that are crucial here. That is, critical thinking is not just thinking, but thinking which entails self-improvement. My dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to repeat this once again. Critical thinking is not just thinking, but thinking which entails self-improvement. And this improvement comes from the skill using standards by which one appropriately assesses thinking. So put it briefly, it is the self-improvement through standards. And so what is challenging about all these things? We need to recognize that critical thinking is not about criticizing. And the challenge in critical thinking is we often tend to find it difficult to overcome our prejudices, our egos, and do not exhibit patience in making an effort to understand an opposing point of view. This is what is the ultimate thing where we go wrong. The challenge in critical thinking, I would like to re-emphasize this, that we often tend to find it difficult to overcome our prejudices, our egos, and do not exhibit patience. We don't have patience in making an effort to understand an opposing point of view. And good thinking is as easy as bad thinking, but it requires hard work to develop it. And critical thinking, therefore, needs constant working upon by individuals, and to make it a practice in one's way of approaching for solutions to any challenges. And critical thinking can be learned. Don't worry, it is not that difficult. It can be learned through displaying of intent towards shedding our old thoughts. We have to shed our old thoughts and beliefs and way of approaching for solutions to challenges, exhibit attitude to learn when newer way of looking at issues are available. So we should be open to look at the newer way of looking at things. And hence, there is a need for us to learn and practice methods to think critically. Anybody who challenges the status quo is a critical thinker. And everybody thinks. Everybody thinks. That is a nature. It starts right from morning till night. Even when we are sleeping, we'll be thinking something. And it is our nature to do so. But much of our thinking left to itself is biased, unclear, partial, uninformed, or downright prejudiced. Yet the quality of our life and that of what we produce, make, or build depends precisely on the quality of our thought. What we think is what we are, and what we achieve based on what we think, because our actions follow our thoughts. And poor thinking is costly, my dear ladies and gentlemen, both in money and in quality of life. Excellence in thought, however, must be systematically cultivated. So to think well is to impose discipline and restraint on our thinking by means of intellectual standards, in order to raise our thinking to a level of perfection or quality that is not naturally or likely in undisciplined, spontaneous thought. And the dimension of critical thinking least understood is that of the intellectual standards. Most teachers were not taught how to assess thinking through standards. We are not taught about a particular way or procedure to follow that. And indeed, often the thinking of teachers, including me, is very undisciplined many times and reflect a lack of internalized intellectual standards. For example, one of the most important distinctions that teachers need to routinely make, and which takes disciplined thinking to make, is that between the reasoning and subjective reaction. So if we are trying to foster quality thinking, we don't want our students simply to assert things. We want them to try to reason things out on the basis of evidence and good reason. So this is very important, and we often are very unclear about this basic difference. At many instances, as teachers, we are apt to take student writing or speech, which is fluent and witty, or the phrases that roll out of their tongue, the way they talk very fast and fluently, that is amusing, and we take that as good thinking. And we are often unclear about the constituents of the good reasoning also. And hence, even though a student may just be asserting things, not reasoning things out at all, if she or he is doing so with vivacity and flamboyance, teachers are apt to take this to be equivalent to good reasoning. So this is where we do a lot of mistake. And so how do we get trained? The faculty development programs on these areas are very essential. And the quality long-term staff development that help the teachers over an extended period of time, over the years and not months. They have to work on their own thinking and come to terms with what intellectual standards are and why they are essential and how to teach for them. And let us be hopeful that eventually through efforts such as these, we can move from superficial to the substantial in fostering quality student thinking. And we all have a system to break down how we understand things, how the world looks to us, and how we make sense to the world. And the ways we think are called as elements of thought. But once we have thought about something, how do we know that if we are right? How do we know we are thinking is any good? Unfortunately, most of the time, we don't think well. And we tend to favor decisions and ideas that favor us and put our own group over other groups. We are egocentric and sociocentric. And so we need to focus ourselves to look at the things the way they truly are. And so to assess the quality of our thinking, we use the intellectual standards. Now, let us see what are those intellectual standards. The universal intellectual standards are the standards which must be applied to thinking, and that is what is going to make us to think in a very structured manner. And to think critically requires the command of these standards. They are nothing but the clarity, accuracy, precision, relevance, depth, breadth, logic, and fairness. So to start with, let us see what is this clarity. So a person is saying something and the other person is not able to understand. I have no idea what he's talking about. So many times it happens. So he may ask him, like, could you elaborate further on that point? Could you express that point in another way? Could you give me an illustration? Many times, in our class also, the students may not understand what we say. They may not have clarity. We may not be giving them the in-depth knowledge of that particular concept also. So clarity is a gateway standard. And if a statement is unclear, we cannot determine whether it is accurate or relevant. In fact, we cannot tell anything about it because we don't yet know what it is saying. And many times it affects the students when they are in the interview also. They will not be able to be clear in their thoughts. So clarity forces the thinking to be explained well so that it is easy to understand. And when thinking is easy to follow, it has clarity. And then the accuracy. So here, two people are walking and a horse and a dog is coming. And one boy is assuming, saying that this a dog weighs more than 30 kgs. That is approximating that. And the other person is asking, oh, really? I don't believe you. So the question comes into our mind, like, is that really true? How could we check that? How could we find out that it is true? So a statement can be clear, but not accurate. So accuracy makes sure that all information is correct and free from error. And if the thinking is reliable, then it has accuracy. Now, precision. So here you can see that a man with a fat belly is eating some pizza or some burger, and two ladies are gossiping. She's telling Ram is overweight, and the other lady is telling, like, that's true, but how much overweight? 20 kgs or 50 kgs? So could you give me more details and could be more specific? So a statement can be both clear and accurate, but not precise. So precision goes one step further than accuracy, and it demands that the words and the data used are exact. If no more details could be added, then it has precision. If you say everything about a situation, then that is what we call it as precision. And then relevance. So here, the student is saying, like, I have given good efforts in studies the whole year, so I should get an A+. The teacher says the effort does not measure the quality of your learning, dear. So there are certain parameters. He has to complete his exam and show how intelligent or how much he understood the subject and other things. He just says, like, the entire year I was very concentrating and I studied very well. I put a lot of effort. So that is not relevant. How it is connected to the question. So a statement can be clear, accurate, and precise, but not relevant to the question at issue. So relevance means that everything included is important, that each part makes a difference. If something is focused on what needs to be said, there is relevance. And then next is depth. So some people, the parents will tell the children, like, no, you should not watch TV more. You should not have screen time. You should not use drugs, or you should not do something, this, that. So there will be some instructions given. And even the teachers give some instructions, but they don't tell them why I should not do that. So nobody tells why. So how does your question answer address the complexities in the question, and how are you taking into account the problems in the question? So a statement can be clear, accurate, precise, and relevant, but superficial. So depth makes an argument thorough. It forces us to explore the complexities. And if an argument includes all the nuances necessary to make the point, it has depth. Next, the breadth. So the child was saying, like, I was studying all night, but what the teacher says, like, that is not sufficient, my dear. You got 0 marks for participation because you did not participate in the class discussion at all. So here, do we consider another point of view? So the child is thinking, like, if he studies and write the exam well, then that is enough in school. But the teacher expects that the child should participate in each and every activity. So here we also have to give weightage to the other person's point of view. So a line of reasoning may be clear, accurate, precise, relevant, and deep, but still ignore another side of the argument. So breadth demands that additional viewpoints are taken into account and are all perspectives considered. When all sides of the argument are discussed, then we find breadth. Then coming to logic. So here the Shaktiman or the Superman, they say that he can see through anything, he can see through walls, and he can see through you. So does this make real sense? So questions will come from children also. So when a combination of thoughts are mutually supporting and make sense in combination, the thinking is logical. So logical means that an argument is reasonable. The thinking is consistent and conclusions follow the evidence. And when something makes sense step by step, then it is logical. Then coming to fairness. So do I have a vested interest in this issue? Am I sympathetically representing the viewpoints of others? Am I open-minded? So we do not naturally consider the rights and needs of others. But to be a good thinker, you should apply fairness in your thinking. So fairness means that the argument is balanced and free from bias. It pushes us to be impartial and even-handed towards other positions. When an argument is objective, there is fairness. So these are the intellectual standards, and if we use these to assess our thinking, then we are on our way to think like a professional. And the critical thinking is the ability to take the information you have obtained through observation, reading, hearing, and experiences, and then evaluating via analysis, questioning, understanding, synthesizing, and rationalizing, and therefore coming up with a model of well-informed thought or idea about how things might fit together or work. So in simple terms, it is a process of breaking down what you know and information you have, and then evaluating and critically analyzing it in order to make informed decision without bias. That is very important. And critical thinking is an ability in deciding through a systematic manner of gathering information, analyzing the information, producing an appropriate solution. And why do we need critical thinking? Critical thinking is required for finding solutions to problems. I will give you another very simple example for you to understand, another way of looking at it. Think of going into a dressing room when you're shopping. How many times do you twist and twirl in front of the three-sided mirror before deciding whether or not to buy? Critical thinking is the three-sided mirror of decision making, letting you look at all the angles to make the best possible choice. So now there is a question, but there are many areas of concern in instruction, not just one, not just critical thinking, but communication skills, problem solving, creative thinking, collaborative learning, self-esteem, and so forth. How are the institutions to deal with the full array of needs, and how are they to do all these rather than simply one, no matter how important that one be? So the answer is, this is the key. Everything essential to education supports everything else essential to education. And it is only when good things in education are viewed superficially and wrongly that they seem disconnected. A bunch of separate goals, a conglomeration of separate problems. In fact, any well-conceived program in critical thinking requires the integration of the skills and abilities that we have mentioned. Hence, critical thinking is not a set of skills separable from excellence in communication, problem solving, creative thinking, or collaborative thinking, nor is it indifferent to one's sense of self-worth. So now let us see how communication skills fit into critical thinking. The communication becomes a part of our education goal, that is in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And these are the four modalities of communication which are essential to education, and each of them is a mode of reasoning. Each of them involves problems, each of them in short through with critical thinking needs. Take apparently simple matter of reading a book worth reading. So the author might have developed her thinking in the book, has taken some ideas and in some way represented those ideas in an extended form. Our job as a reader is to translate the meaning of the author into the meanings that we can understand. So what are all the questions we are supposed to ask while reading? This is a complicated process requiring critical think every step along the way. What is the purpose for the book? What is the author trying to accomplish? What issues or problems are raised? What data, what experiences, what evidences are given? What concepts are used to organize this data, these experiences? So all of these kinds of questions that a critical reader raises, and a critical reader in this sense is simply someone trying to come to terms with the text. So if one is an uncritical reader, writer, speaker, or listener, one is not a good reader, writer, speaker, or listener at all. So to do any of these well is to think critically while doing so, and at one point of time, to solve specific problems of communication, hence to effectively communicate. Now coming to self-esteem, how does self-esteem fit into the critical thinking? So the healthy self-esteem emerges from a justified sense of self-worth, just as self-worth emerges from competence, ability, and genuine success. If one simply feels good about oneself for no good reason, then one is either arrogant or alternatively has a dangerous sense of misplaced confidence. Teenagers, for example, sometimes they think so well of themselves that they operate under an illusion that they can safely drive even while drunk, and they can safely have drugs. They all feel so overconfident, they feel that much too highly of their own competence and powers, and are much too unaware of their limitations. So to accurately sort out the genuine self-worth from a false sense of self-esteem requires, yes, you guessed it, critical thinking. And then coming to collaborative learning, how collaborative learning fit into critical thinking? The collaborative learning is desirable only if grounded in disciplined critical thinking. Without critical thinking, collaborative learning is likely to become collaborative mislearning. It is collaborative bad thinking in which the bad thinking being shared becomes validated. Remember, a gossip is a form of collaborative learning. Peer group indoctrination, the process of teaching a person or a group to accept a set of beliefs, is a form of collaborative learning. And mass hysteria is a form of speed collaborative learning. We learn prejudices collaboratively, social hurts, fears collaboratively, stereotypes, narrow mind, everything we learn collaboratively. So if we don't put disciplined critical thinking into the heart and soul of the collaboration, we get the mode of collaboration which is antithetical, and that is to the education, knowledge, and the insight. So that is very, very important that we have to put in our mind, and we have to understand that it is very, very important that we use critical thinking in all the things we do. And critical thinking model, actually. So here it says that critical thinking model outlines the various steps in making an informed decision. The steps include understanding the issue, formulating the goal and criteria, obtaining complete information, and finally reaching the appropriate solution. A critical thinker needs to deeply analyze the issue at hand by differentiating facts and opinions so as to negate the individual biases. And we need to learn to ask questions. This is very, very important, probing the issue through asking questions, analyzing the information collected, and making decisions based on logic and evidence. And this is something very, very important. The secrets to critical thinking are in being able to identify assumptions, evaluating arguments, and arriving at a right conclusion. So now I request each and every one of you to look at this picture. It is a picture shows the monsoon. So on seeing the picture, I ask each and every one of you to understand what your mind leaps to. What do you think about it? What do you think when you see that? Each and everyone will have some thought. Some may be having a happy feeling, oh, nice, I can go and play there. Some may be feeling that, oh, my clothes will be wet. I will not be able to do something outside, outdoor today. So many thoughts come into the minds. Suppose we consider these farmers and children, how happy they'll feel. The farmers will feel very happy that their fields will be with water and filled with water. And the students will be very, very happy that the schools will be holiday and they can also play in rain. And what happens to these people? The hawkers, the people who sleep on roads, the people who sell the goods on roads with their cart. Just imagine what will run in their mind. Hawkers on streets are worried about their livelihoods being badly affected. That day is gone for them. That day is gone for them. The same picture triggers different impressions to different people. This happens as our thinking are tuned differently because we think according to our need only. We won't be able to understand the needs of the other person. That is very, 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 very important. That is what we call it as mental models. The mental models are the impressions created on seeing a picture, on hearing something, on certain observations during an interaction, and our interpretations to those observations. So we have seen earlier, the same picture triggers different impressions in different people. We also do the same thing. When we see somebody talking to somebody and looking at us, we may think they are talking about us. Lot of assumptions we do. And what are mental models? The mental models are personal, internalized theories of reality, and they represent how things work. And one needs to identify one's own mental model, which assists in methods of analyzing them, exploring their effect on decision makings, because we make all our decisions based on what we think, what goes into our mind. So now I'm going to tell you a methodology to do this critical thinking. So ladder of inference is a helpful tool to assist us into breaking down the entire process in a logical and sequential manner. So here our step-by-step thinking process comes about from our experiences of what we see and what we observe. We have data that we are observing. We sometimes select the data that is most relevant to us. Almost we select only what is relevant to us, and we add meaning to it. We only add meaning to it. And with that, we add some additional meanings also based on our prior experiences, and we draw conclusions about what is going on. Many times it happens in our life, ladies and gentlemen. So to amplify my point, let me narrate to you a real life incident. I'm going to talk about this executive of a company named Rashmi, who is tasked with a job by her manager with fixed time guidelines. So here, however, the manager finds that Rashmi has not submitted the project report as per the time line specified. She also does not intimate the manager of the status of her work. She proceeds on sick leave without submitting the work completion report. So let us now analyze the situation step by step with the ladder of inference tool and critically analyze whether the manager's conclusions were based on sound reasoning. So first one is observation. The manager's experiences. The project report deadline missed by Rashmi and no explanations offered by her. She further proceeds on sick leave. And the data, manager's observations. Rashmi deliberately took leave to get away from the assignment. She avoided talking to him. And the manager's understanding, what he is understanding, Rashmi faked illness and lied. And she was not at all interested in the assignment. And manager's assumptions, what does he assume? Rashmi is not interested in taking up additional responsibility and she is irresponsible. And manager's conclusions, since Rashmi is unwilling and irresponsible, he was not ready to trust her and avoided giving her additional responsibilities in the future. And manager's action, what happened? He does not trust Rashmi any further, and he becomes very curt with her and avoids including her in all of his future projects. But in reality, what is the truth? The reality is Rashmi, on return from sick leave, submits an extremely well compiled and meaningful report, which largely goes unnoticed because of the manager's preconceived beliefs and assumptions. Now, audience, my dear ladies and gentlemen, just think about this case study. What could have been done to make the situation better? Ideally, the manager should have been more proactive in getting to know her work status and reviewing progress on a regular basis and not waiting for final submission. And additionally, he should have accepted on face value the reasons offered by Rashmi and should not have influenced by his own inferences that were not logical. So many times when we talk about our assumptions about some students, our own family members, or our principal about us, many situations you can relate to this, and many conclusions and many decisions are made based on assumptions without even going and inquiring about what has happened. They don't have patience to listen. Even if they listen, they will only take into mind what is already there in their mind. We don't listen what we want to listen, we take only what we wanted. We don't listen actual things. So I'm sure Many of you can relate yourself to being in a similar position and a similar kind of issues in your college or at home. And think about how many times have you realistically looked at the issues and have not been influenced by your own beliefs. So this is one thing which is very, very important to be a critical thinker. And we often hear what we want to hear. As I said, though someone will be saying something, our mind will receive as how we wanted to receive. So that is the problem. And we often hear what validates our beliefs, our assumptions, our experiences, and our mental models. So what can we do? We need to slow down the way of doing things and look at how we are doing and understand how our thoughts are influencing what we are doing and how we came about doing this through our data collection. So that is very, very important. And the primary skills for critical thinking is what? Learn to ask good questions. Want to exercise critical thinking? Ask these questions whenever you discuss or discover few information. These are broad, versatile questions that have limitless application. Questions like who, what, where, when, why, how, helps us to know in-depth knowledge about any information or any situation where we need to find a solution. So when you're problem solving, especially when you're working with other people, it is really helpful to learn to ask questions. So learning to ask questions itself is a big skill. And how do we apply critical thinking to walking down the ladder of inference? So identify the conclusion someone else is making. Ask for the data that led to that conclusion. Inquire into the reasoning that connects data and conclusion, and infer a possible belief or assumption, and state your inference and test it with the person. So this is how we can apply critical thinking to walk down the ladder of inference and ways to becoming a critical thinker. So just as a teacher, what do we do when we go to class? We just rub the entire board, clean the board like that, like a teacher before beginning a class, wipes the blackboard, cleans and begins to write matter related to the subject being taught. Similarly, before we attempt to create or think new, we have to have an open or empty mind. In other words, we have to have an empty bubble in our head so that we can add all sorts of ideas and opinions. So listen rather than think of your response. Focus on the future rather than the past and acknowledge your reactions. So when we think of our mental model, instead of having a picture of the happy farmer or the picture of a sad hawker, how do we create either an empty bubble or the bubble that is large enough to include the perspective of others when we are looking at a current problem situation? And so the goal is to spend a lot of time listening and asking a lot of questions to challenging everyone's thinking. And so how can we look at this in a way that will empty my bubble? And the goal of this is to have what we refer to as a beginner's mindset. A beginner's mindset is really just trying to think to a certain extent like a 7-year-old child. 7-year-old does not have a lot of experience and perspectives. They don't have many biases that they bring to a situation. And so a lot of times we need to think to find that beginner's mindset is to think in terms of, if we have never been presented with this situation before, how can we think about it now in a new way? It is our nature to always take the easy path. Just like water flows in a particular direction where there is no obstacle, we always try to go in an easy path. So once we have thought in a perspective of how to think critically, our goal then is really think about how do we ask good questions, because it's not enough just to think that, okay, I have to change my mindset. I have to be a little more open. I have to understand why I think the way I do. I have to spend time thinking, finding out how other people also think. Do I have the skills actually to ask questions? Once I recognize that I do need to ask myself and other people questions. So learning to ask questions effectively is a skill that does take some time to practice. And, Albert Einstein once said that if I had 1 hour to solve a problem. I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problems and just 5 minutes thinking about these solutions. So if reality is well stated, problem is already half solved. And one of the biggest challenge in problem solving is being clear about what you're trying to accomplish and explain the problems to others. We need to be able to explain the problems in such a way that one can easily explain the problems so that we can engage into the problem solving process. This is the problem solving process. Define the problem, develop a problem, implement a problem, evaluate it. And now let us see how to recognize a problem and to determine its importance and severity so that you can make or begin to think critically and begin problem solving. So we all face different problems in everyday life. Some are simple and requiring a short period of time to solve, and others are complex and demand much of your time and thought. I'm going to give you all these problems and challenges, what we teachers face every day. In general time, you have lack of time for planning, lot of paperwork, performance pressure from school administrators, balancing diverse learning needs, handle too many masters, get burnout easily, changing education trends, limitations of disciplining students, lack of self-time, and teachers working so many roles at the same time, and teachers being made responsible for more than they should, and applying a prescribed curriculum to all type of students and inspiring students to more self-directed differentiating and personalizing teaching, getting students to work outside the class, textbook exposure to learning, redundant teaching techniques, and stagnant tech devices. So you may have adding more and more to this, but I've just listed a few, and this is something very, very unique challenges what even today we face, that is online teaching. Passive students, staying connected with students is a challenge. Encouraging collaboration, adaptability, conducting exams, lack of technical software knowledge, time management, self-motivation, distraction of students, virtual engagement, difficult to reach students in remote areas, difficult to motivate students, challenges to keep tracking of students' progress, problem of electricity, internet connectivity, required more time in preparing the e-course content, and difficult to teach numerical subject through online mode, and difficult to monitor discipline, and lack of satisfaction. So all these are the present day problems, and you cannot solve a problem without first determining that you have one. So you need to first of all identify that you have a problem. So once you recognize the problem, you will want to prioritize. Does your problem demand immediate attention, or can't it wait until you're finished working on something else? So you have to now put them into different boxes, whether it is most important, important and urgent, not important, or not urgent, and urgent but not important. So you have to decide, and if you have more than one situation to resolve, you must rank them in order of importance, tackling the most important first. That is very, very important. And what is a problem? In terms of critical thinking skills, a problem is defined as a question or situation that calls for a solution. And that means when you're faced with a problem, you must take action or make decisions that will lead to resolution of that problem. So how, as teachers, we can think critically to solve our problems? I will just give some solutions for some of the problems what the teachers face. Challenging passive students. Oh my God, how many students we have who are very, very passive. They don't interact, they don't show activeness, they don't answer, they don't get engaged, that too in online. So unless thoughtfully crafted online instruction can to these students into passive observers rather than active participants. Although these unengaged students may acquire the lecture content, they are unable to apply their learnings outside the virtual classroom. They might pass assessments and complete learning activities, but they are not planning on using their knowledge, new knowledge, to make connections with previous material or real world examples. For learning to be effective, students must be engaged in the quality, breadth, and depth of their learning. So what are the solutions? How we can think critically and bring a solution to this particular challenge? In online learning environments, it's important to help the students engage with course material in a way that makes sense for them, and providing them with ample flexible opportunities to reinforce course concepts that will ensure that a learning material sticks whatever they learn, that should stick in their mind even after they have completed their final assessment. So especially when students are learning remotely, educators must recognize that students will only engage with course materials if they see them as valuable with digital courseware. So online teachers can adopt or create a customizable interactive textbook to extend active learning outside of class meetings with inline interactive questions. So it is easy to track completion and comprehension of course content, and these questions can be used to introduce new concepts, reinforce students' understanding of topics, and assess learning. Instructors can also easily export grades and participation data to their learning management system. And another challenge, staying connected with students. How can we stay connected with the online students? Feedback loops are the key to building strong connections with learners in an online environment. When students complete a task, they get feedback and make adjustments accordingly. To give effective commentary, instructors must explain why a student is receiving a feedback and suggest how they can improve in future. Then encouraging collaboration. How can we encourage collaboration? Problem-based learning or the project-based learning is a collaborative learning strategy that gives students the opportunity to apply course material to real-world case studies in small groups. This method, whether used in group learning or individually, helps students build upon their creativity and critical thinking skills. And knowing their students well, how the teachers can know their students well. A broad mind and a friendly attitude on the part of a teacher will make all the difference when it comes to knowing the students well and understanding the different learning abilities and capacities of students. How can we overcome this challenge? Talking individually to the students, designing modules as per their requirements, and assigning tasks to them based on their interests, and then assessing their progress is vital here and will contribute to an overall personality growth. And when students underperform, how do we handle this challenge? Lending a shoulder, a word of comfort and support, instilling confidence and a positive attitude towards students in their tough times is bound to bring a sea change in the lives of these students. And being a bridge between the management, parent, and the students. Every teachers will have this difficulty in their institutions. So teachers should be accountable to the management as well and need to cooperate with the changing rules and regulations and play a key role in cementing a healthy bond between management, parent, and the students. So what are all the barriers to recognize a problem? So we have all these challenges, whatever I put in. How many of you have thought it as a prior problem, and how many of you have found ways to rectify this? So what are the barriers? One of the most common reasons for not recognize a problem is a desire to avoid taking action or responsibility. The thinking goes that no recognition means no responsibility. And let us take the case of a student who is finding it difficult to understand mathematics being taught and therefore unable to score good marks in the examination. Example. Here, the student may not want to express his difficulty or of not able to get marks to the parents. This is because of the student's fears. The parent would then arrange for a tuition class and he has to forego his television time and he can't go and play. So he will not tell that. So realize that by not recognizing the problem, you make the solution also more difficult. And the initial problem could grow larger and more complex with time. Or by waiting, you could create multiple problems that need solutions. So recognizing problem is very, very important, and failure to recognize the problem would result if the student has not recognized. Similarly, the teacher has not recognized the problem of student not understanding. Finally, we will not be able to get the results. So in other words, the failure to recognize a problem almost always creates more work for us. And there are two types. One is severity and importance. So these problems may be identified by the following characteristics, which require immediate solution. They are severe problems and very, very important. Suppose a child is having headache and it is difficult for the child to see the board. And it is essential to understand that this is a very severe problem, because if it can't see the board, then it will not be able to understand. Second problem is not understanding, but the first prior problem is because of the headache. That is the problem with the eye. So what they have to do, using the ladder of inference, observable, experiencing a headache. Data selection, cannot see clearly the blackboard. Adding meaning, reporting to parents of his difficulties to the parents about the vision. And assumptions based on meaning added, eyesight needs correction. And conclusion what? Seeking the opinion of an eye specialist, and adoption based on their own beliefs, visiting an eye specialist, and action based on own beliefs, adopting the advice of the eye specialist and taking action for addressing the headache. So this is one. So prioritizing means looking at each problem or issue and ranking it in terms of importance. So we need to know what is more important. And we can also use a web map. One of the ways to use a web map is to write down what is the problem, you can go back and see this. One of the ways in using critical thinking skills in finding the solution is using the web map. To develop a web, write your problem in the circle. Next, write the symptoms or possible causes of the problem in smaller and secondary circles, each connected to the center by the line. And from each of the secondary bubble, draw the smaller bubbles in which you brainstorm possible solutions. Each possible solution is connected to the corresponding secondary bubble by a line. So this is your main problem, and you're writing what are all the possible symptoms, and then you're writing these solutions for that. So this will help you to think critically. And also the gap analysis. What is the problem solving is nothing but the gap analysis. That is where you are now is the current state, and the gap, what is keeping you as from reaching the desired state. And the desired outcome is where you want to go. So current state to the desired state. Here you have a problem, and this is the state where you have resolved your problems. That means what? You have to take some action to resolve that problem. So that is what you need to think about, this gap analysis. And a gap analysis is just looking at what is the current state versus the desired state, and what is preventing us from meeting the desired state. And addressing the gaps, identify issues that could get in your way and take care of them. And troubleshooting is also about taking care of the setbacks that can prevent you from reaching the goal. And from small difficulties to major setbacks, these problems must be resolved in order to get where you need to go. And this is a troubleshooting graph where each and every problem can be entered into this, and how to avoid it and how to solve it. So you have to make a map so that you will be really knowing when you put it in writing that where and how to avoid it and how to solve it. Any decision making system or the process follows this path. That is recognizing the problem, defining the problem, practice focused observation to learn more about the problem, brainstorm possible solutions, choose a solution and set goals, troubleshoot any problem that get in the way of your goals, try the solution and assess your results, and use, modify or reject the solution, and repeat the process if necessary. So these are all some of the traits of critical thinker. A critical thinker will be a self-guided, self-confident, self-disciplined, fair-minded, flexible, courageous, creative, well-informed, and intellectual personality. And 9 key characteristics of a critical thinker is an open-minded, facts before feelings, and response over reactions, and validation before reaction and problem solving, empathy over intelligence, and facts from personal opinions, and right think first. And there are some myths for critical thinking. People think like it is applied only to limited fields, and only few people can think critically, and it requires multiple steps, and only young people can think critically, and critical thinking is not useful in routine life, and high thinking is similar to deep thinking, and no need to spend time for critical thinking. And critical thinking is rejected and disapproved. Critical thinking is a natural science, and arguments or fights are called as critical thinking. People have such myths about critical thinking, and the importance of critical thinking in among these students is these play vital roles for the students to secure seats in colleges and also in good organizations. And also this will improve this ability will form very important part in the students' aptitude, and also the future in a certain university or specific area for the students. This requires a lot. And in the workplace, how it is useful. You can learn and quickly solve problems. It shows creativity and gathers and analyze the issue meaningfully. And this has become a vital skill for every professional. And in daily life, you can can avoid making wrong decisions and helps us become a good citizen, and also helps us developing good thinking skill as well. And barriers, what are the barriers? You might ask, if the critical thinking is so important, then why is uncritical thinking so common? So what are the barriers? One is the self-centered thinking, self-interest thinking, thinking self as center of attention, and sociocentrism, that is group-centered thinking, group interest thinking, and to assume that own group is more superior or righteous, and unwarranted assumptions, the belief that something is true without proper evidence or justification, and wishful thinking, believing something is true because one wishes it to be true, and relativism, thinking that truth is just a matter of opinion. So that is what is the barriers of critical thinking. And the benefits: it develops opinions, it increases self-awareness, it helps you understand others, and increases decision-making abilities. And how do you improve them? Whenever you think about a certain topic, think about it objectively. The first thing you can do is draw a table in your mind with pros and cons on either side. Think about the topic in terms of positive and negative, or advantageous and disadvantageous traits, and you will begin to understand the topic in a much better way, and will have a strong opinion which will be based on your rational thought. And be curious and ask questions. Another method is ask questions, and it will improve your knowledge about the topic, and you will learn to look at the subject from all points, and discuss with your peers, and read a lot, and find problems and try solving them, and note down your observations. And one important aim of education should be to create a creativity climate. When children ask so many questions, when the students ask so many questions, we don't answer to all of them. So we need to allow the students to ask questions. There should be a methodology in our teaching learning process where there should be only the students asking framing questions about a topic. And how does it fit in critical thinking? To flourish, curiosity must evolve into disciplined inquiry and reflection, and left to itself, it will soar like a kite without a tail, that is right into the ground. And intellectual curiosity is an important trait of mind, and it requires intellectual humility, courage, integrity, and perseverance. And after all, intellectual curiosity is not a thing in itself, valuable in itself and for itself. So we have to improve our mind, and the mind must be more curious. It must be willing to work, willing to suffer through confusion and frustration, willing to face limitations and overcome obstacles, and open to views of others, and willing to entertain ideas that many people find threatening. So you have to ask a lot of questions, allow the students to ask a lot of questions, and that is very, very important. And in this present scenario, the world is changing a lot, and where one cannot strive without simply one way of thinking is not enough. So where one must continually adapt one's thinking to thinking of others. And present scenario where one must respect the need of accuracy, the world in which job skills must be continually upgraded and perfected, even transformed. So we have to prepare our students accordingly. And we as educators are now on the firing line. Are we willing to fundamentally rethink our methods of teaching? Are we ready for the 21st century? Are we willing to learn new concepts and ideas? Are we willing to learn a new sense of discipline as we teach it to our students? And are we willing to bring new rigor to our own thinking in order to help our students bring that same rigor to theirs? Are we willing, in short, to become critical thinkers so that we might be an example of what our students must internalize and become? So these are all the challenges we have. We are teaching something to the 21st century students. It is not like what we had in our times. So we have to prepare ourselves, and we need to have a sound knowledge base from which to support the more in-depth content should be shared to the students, and remain open to challenge by students not representing themselves as a source of knowledge, and encourage students to look at the big picture by engaging them in critical thinking process that have relevance beyond the classroom. And be prepared to listen to voices that originate in the classroom, and encourage students to question, and avoid offering how to do it approaches, and encourage students to be sensitive to the feelings of others, and provide opportunities for inquiry by giving students time for processing and debriefing and structure lessons so that students can work safely and cooperatively and develop creative forms of shared responsibility and encourage students to take critical actions. And that is how I thought I can share with you what is critical thinking and what is the problem solving process. Thank you so much.